funding issue. Is there a movement to deal with the funding issue in the legislature? Has a bill been introduced?
Not yet. I think this is an issue that has surfaced as we've really scrutinized what needs to happen from a state perspective. And, you know, I'm encouraged by today's actions. That we've had over nearly 25 local school districts who have passed similar resolutions as Woodridge. So I think there's the conversation is just getting started. I think the urgency around the need to pass charter reform is there, and I'm optimistic that we'll continue to call attention to these issues and hopefully see some action on this before the year's end.
I can add to that.
Please.
During the budget process, we did have members who indicated and actually offered amendments to call for a study on the funding system for charters. Unfortunately, those amendments didn't make it into the omnibus amendment and weren't accepted in the Finance Committee in either the House or the Senate. But we are hoping to be able to go back to those legislators and other legislators to work with us on this issue.
Do you support direct funding versus via deduction from the locals? I mean, if the state just sent the money directly to the school versus...
I can say, speaking for OEA, yes, we would support a system that directly funds schools instead of deducting charter funding from local districts.
Yeah, and in fact, we had, back in 2010, the Ohio School Funding Advisory Council, which isn't around anymore, but at the time there was a subcommittee dealing with better cooperation and collaboration between the local public schools and charter schools. That was the first thing they agreed to, was direct state funding. So again, there has been broad-based support in both the charter and local school sector for direct funding from the state. I mean, the charter schools are creatures of state law, and they probably should be dealt with at primarily the state level on the funding side. So again, I think that would help alleviate some of the issue.
Senator Faber said that he'd like to see HB2 passed in September, going through a conference committee and making some tweaks. Is there any fear that that bill would be watered down at all in the next month?
As a former legislator who has seen the process work and has seen the conference committees on various bills, that's always a concern. And again, you know, there were a lot of positive comments about House Bill 2 back in June, and it ended up not going anywhere. It went through the Senate, but again, it stalled in the House, even though everybody was saying we're going to do it. And again, it's, you know, I don't think it's a matter of them actually, you know, reading the bill. I mean, they passed the Youngstown plan in a day. Certainly, they would be able to deal with the issues on charter schools, which have been talked about for almost 3 decades now. Certainly they would understand what was in that bill as much as they would the Youngstown plan. So again, I think it is a concern. We've got to get over that hump. For too long, politics have really played havoc with our charter school laws, and I'm hoping that the quality-based charter community, which has really stood up large on this issue, will have enough sway to help us move forward the agenda of reform.
Along those lines, there were hints at possibly addressing the evaluation process, possibly in this bill when it comes to evaluating online schools. Is this the vehicle to take on that situation, take on evaluations?
Yeah, I mean, again, the online charter school issue in Ohio is a real problem. And in fact, it's a real drag on the overall charter sector. Something like 85–87% of all the charter money that goes from districts that outperform the charter on every report card category to the charter goes to you know, just a few statewide e-schools. You know, every dollar that went to ECOT from Youngstown, which everybody said is struggling so much academically, the state's got to take it over. Every dollar that's going from Youngstown to ECOT is going to a worse charter school. So again, I think that the online school situation has got to be addressed. And I think there's an understanding that while e-schools and virtual schools may have a role, places like ECOT, Ohio Virtual Academy, places that are the size of, Lorraine at this point, 15,000 kids. The two largest for-profit charter schools in the country are ECOT and OHVA. But there are real serious concerns about the performance in those schools. There's concern about churn, there's concern about all kinds of things with them. And this is not just concern expressed by us, it's a concern expressed by charter advocates around the country. So I do think that we need to seriously address that issue. And I know that there are legislators in the House and Senate that feel the same way.
I think it's important also to remember that the requirement to establish a sponsor rating system for schools is already in the law. And we need the State Board of Education and we need the Ohio Department of Education to do their job in making sure that they get this done. They've had a long time to get a rating system in place and they failed to act. And in fact, we saw what happened when they just decided to conveniently exclude online schools from the ratings that were released the first time. So there's a lot of questions there, and I hope that nobody's going to say, let's use that issue as an excuse to slow down the passage of House Bill 2. House Bill 2 needs to pass. There's clear agreement. The great work that was led by Senator Lehner and Senator Sawyer, I think, led to a solid piece of legislation that they need to pass. And then let's make sure that the department and the State Board do their job in following through on those ratings.
Could you give us an idea what you think of this, I believe it's a 3-member panel that was named last week to come up with an evaluation system for charter schools?
Yeah, sure. I'll start by saying it is encouraging that Superintendent Ross recognizes that there's a problem that needs to be addressed by establishing that panel. But we need to make sure that the entire State Board is really digging into some important questions that need to be answered. One, about what happened with the exclusion of those ratings before. I know that all of you have been asking for some emails, and we're eagerly waiting to see what's in those emails and why the delay in releasing them. But then the other thing, as far as the State Board goes, is that they do need to, I think what the majority of the elected members are calling for, which is getting to the bottom of that question and also auditing the data on these charter schools needs to happen as well. So whether it happens through this 3-person panel or not remains to be seen. But again, at least there's an acknowledgement that there's a problem that needs to be addressed. I hope that they really do their due diligence to find the answers to those questions.
Yeah, and just to be clear, the bill that created that passed in December of 2012. So they've had a long time to do this. And all this is going to do is delay needed reforms. And what's so important about understanding the sponsor evaluation and why it's so key to what's happening is all the reforms, even the reforms in House Bill 2, are key to coming down harder on sponsors. So if you have a compromised sponsor rating system, you jeopardize the good work that's been done on reform on a bipartisan level throughout the state. So it's key to get it right, and I commend the superintendent for doing that. Unfortunately, they've had since December 2012 to start thinking about getting it right, and here we are back at square one. So again, it's been a while. They've had some time to do it, and when they ended up doing it, they rigged it. So there are some concerns about that, but I do think a 3-member panel, I guess if you're going to start from square one, it might as well, that's a decent start.
The amount of funding that Woodridge says it loses every time a student leaves, that's higher than the per pupil amount that the state funds charter students at, so where's the rest of the
When they fund charter schools, it's not just the state per pupil amount, they also put in classifications for special ed identification, so it varies, it's not a set number.
categorical A?
Categorical A, yeah.
Is transportation in there?
No, it is not.
And this spreadsheet was provided which fiscal year, or when is this from?
That would be,
Yeah, that's from the June #2 report from 14-15 school year, so it's the last school year. It's going to be different from what's up on here because that's from 13-14. Okay.
This is,
14, 15.
okay.
And you talked about.
That's from the June number 2 payment when you go on the OEA website.
And we talked about direct funding, is there any other proposals being tossed around for how to fund charter schools?
Yeah. Again, you know, Mackie Raymond, who's the director of the Center for Research on Educational Outcomes at Stanford, said that the current marketplace doesn't work for charter schools. I think you need to look at a funding system that actually creates a market where it's beneficial to be good and it's not beneficial to be poor. So, you know, back in 2009, for instance, in House Bill 1, when I was in the legislature, we put in a provision in the House version of that budget that passed that year. It ended up not happening this way, but where we put in some differentiated funding for high-performing charters. Again, right now, every charter in the state under this budget got a per-pupil increase, regardless of their quality. So even though ECOT got all Fs and 1D on the state report card, they're going to be getting an increase. I think looking at a system that actually rewards success and doesn't reward failure is going to be a market that I think could actually lead the country on that. So there have been discussions about different ways of getting there.
Thank you all for coming to